Good morning, happy Friday. We made it second week of distance learning and we're all still trucking along. I think you all are amazing and I hope that you're excited for the last day before spring break and that you can get some rest next week and enjoy lots of time outside. That's what I hope to do. Maybe get some gardening in. I might try and do a little video later of some flowers I found in my backyard, but we'll see. We want to finish our book on Machu Picchu so that we can move on to other books and readings and research ideas after the break. So I hope you're still with me and enjoying the story. The first part before we jump into chapter 7 is actually called Hiram Bingham and Indiana Jones. I don't know if any of you have heard of him or not. But was Indiana Jones based on Hiram Bingham? It's very possible. The first movie begins with Indiana Jones running through a jungle in Peru, carrying a bullwhip and looking for lost treasure. But in the next scene, he's back at his job as a mild-mannered college professor, just like Hiram Bingham. When Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981, audiences laughed at the surprising idea that an action hero could also be a quiet professor. Hiram Bingham wasn't exactly an action hero, but his search for a lost Inca city was probably one inspiration for the Indiana Jones movies. Interesting. Chapter 7, The Discovery. Within 2 years of returning to the United States, Hiram was ready to leave again. His wife didn't want him to go. It wasn't a good time. She had just had a baby and her father had just died, but nothing was going to stop Hiram Bingham from exploring. In fact, in 1910, his name was included in the book called Who's Who in America, a list of famous people. Hiram had the publishers list his job as explorer, even though at the time he was mainly a history professor at Yale. Before he could leave for South America, Hiram had to organize and plan the trip. It was called the 1911 Yale Peruvian Expedition. First, he had to find a team of experts to come along with him. Hiram chose 6 men, experts in subjects such as geography, chemistry, medicine, map making, mountain climbing, and nature. Then he had to raise enough money to pay for supplies and travel. It was going to cost $12,000. In 1911, that was a lot of money. It would be about $250,000 in today's money, or $250,000. Hiram sold his family's property in Hawaii to get part of the cash. He also went to Harper's Magazine and promised to write 4 articles for them when he got back. They paid Hiram in advance. Then he asked the Kodak company to give him cameras and film. He asked Abercrombie & Fitch, the sporting goods company, to give him a discounted price on hiking gear. The fun fact that Abercrombie & Fitch was sporting goods before it was clothing. So he got some sponsors to help him pay for his exploration. On June 8th, 1911, Hiram and his team sailed from New York City to Panama and then on to Lima, Peru. When they reached Lima, Hiram immediately began asking questions. He was a detective trying to solve a mystery. Where should he look? He went to the library and met with a history expert. He copied down notes about Vilcabamba written by a Spanish priest in the years after Spain defeated the Incas. He went to the Geographical Society, a place where old as well as new maps were kept. He bought several maps that might help. He also met with the president of Peru. The president sent 3 army sergeants along with Hiram's group to make sure they would be safe. Next, Hiram and his team took a train to Cuzco. When he got there, he asked more questions about the lost city he was searching for. Several local people knew or suspected that there were some wonderful ruins north of Cuzco. Here's a picture of him sailing and leaving New York, heading to Peru. Rumors of the ruins at Machu Picchu had probably come from peasants who lived nearby, but no one from the city of Cuzco or anywhere else bothered to check them out. Hiram met a fellow American who was a professor at the University of Cuzco. His name was Albert Giesecke. He gave Hiram Bingham the best clue of all. He told Hiram how to find a man named Melchior Arteaga. A while back in January, Melchior had offered to show Giuseppe some fabulous ruins, but it had been the rainy season then, a bad time for climbing a slippery mountain, so Giuseppe didn't go. Hiram decided to divide the scientists in his group into 3 teams. 2 of the teams were sent off on their own to make maps of the valleys and towns nearby. Hiram's group was to search for Inca ruins. They would also collect insects. One of the members of Hiram's team was a specialist who collected nature samples. It took 5 days for Hiram's small group to travel by mule to the river valley where Melchior lived. On the way, Hiram's team visited the ruins of another one of Pachacuti's royal palaces, the palace at Ollantaytambo. Then they pitched some tents near the grass-thatched hut where Melchior lived. There's a picture of them on horseback traveling through. On the 6th day, Hiram was ready to see the ruins that Melchior had described. He dressed for the trip wearing tall boots, khaki pants, a jacket with many pockets, a scarf at his neck, and a brimmed hat. The lower part of his legs were tightly wrapped in strips of heavy cloth to protect him from snake bites. But it was cold and drizzly that morning. Melchior didn't seem to want to go. Hiram offered him a Peruvian silver dollar, 3 or 4 times as much money as a guide would normally charge. Finally, Melchior agreed to lead Hiram and a sergeant up the mountain to Machu Picchu. The others stayed behind. At the top of the mountain, there were indeed ruins. In fact, 3 families of peasant farmers had been living there for 4 years. They had cleared some of the terraces from the forgotten royal palace and were growing crops. They offered Hiram and the other 2 men water from a gourd, a kind of cup made from a hollowed-out fruit. They also gave them cooked sweet potatoes to eat while they rested. Then Melchior sat and chatted with the family while Hiram and the sergeant went to explore the ruins. At first he didn't think there was much to see, but the family sent a young boy along with them to show him the way. The boy led him climbing through the thick shrubs and vines growing over the terraces. Then they climbed up and over the terrace walls and further up a steep hill with some stone steps. Much of it was overgrown. At first, it was hard to see much. But eventually they came to what Hiram had been hoping for. Fabulous ancient buildings made of perfectly cut blocks of white stone. He thought that 2 of the buildings had the finest stonework he'd ever seen. Each time he rounded a corner or climbed to another terrace, he found something more, another temple, another group of houses. For the next 5 hours, Hiram explored the ruins and took pictures of them. In many of the pictures, he and the boy or the sergeant pose as well. It was the best way to show how big the buildings actually were. Hiram made careful notes too, so he could write about this discovery when he got back home. Of course, Hiram wasn't the first person ever to see the abandoned ruins at Machu Picchu. Other peasants, besides the ones living in the ruins, knew about the place. Hiram also found a man's name written on one of the temple walls. Picture of them taking pictures. It said, Lizarraga, with the date 1902. Augustin Lizarraga was a local farmer who had explored the site years before Hiram got there. But Hiram Bingham's visit that day in 1911 would be remembered in history books forever. It was the first time Machu Picchu was known to the outside world, and it would turn out to be one of the most incredible sights in all of South America. Last chapter, and we'll finish this up.